This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Thank you, Ed, and welcome to all our listeners and viewers of Voices in Validation, a podcast of the IVT Network. I am very excited to welcome today Steve Thompson. He's the Director of Computer Quality Assurance at Science 37, and he has many years' experience in medical devices as well as the software industry. So thanks for being with us today, Steve.
Great. It's good to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to our discussion here.
Of course, as do I. So prior to us talking this morning, you and I had a conversation about implementing case for quality in computer software assurance. And I understand case for quality is like a brand new effort. Although it's not a brand new thing, it's a brand new effort of the FDA. So I'm hoping you can talk about a little bit of the history there. The FDA, I think, if I'm not mistaken, launched case for quality in 2011. As an in-depth review of medical device manufacturing and the common risks impacting product quality. So why now are we seeing a greater push for this, not only in medical devices, but on a widespread level?
Sure. So great question. If you go back in time, and kind of the start actually for me in this was 1996, 1997. And ironically, I worked in a different industry. It kind of fell apart and I needed to do something. I was automating labs and went into a company to automate a pharmaceutical lab, and Part 11 hit in 1997. So that was over 20 years ago, and the regulation has not changed. Now, they came out with draft guidance around 2003, I believe it was, and then they withdrew the draft guidance. And the reason for that draft guidance was a risk-based approach because they realized that there were problems. And the problems were that it was costing industry a lot of money. There were fines associated with Part 11 and in the millions of dollars, and estimates say it could be in the billions that validation has cost. And when you look at the industry averages, an average validation effort, and this is across the board basically, computer systems, equipment, method cleaning, facilities, process, et cetera. So across the board, validation on average is about 20% for good average practice, 15% for good practice, and about less than 5% for best practice. So 20% of every project is significant. If you have $1 million computer system, that's $200,000 just going to validation. And the other thing, when you think about 1997, if you go back in time, we had modems. We were using CDs to install software. The cloud didn't exist. So we had Windows 95, I think it was back then. So technology has advanced exponentially, but Part 11 hasn't changed. So given all of those considerations, we have so much technology right now that we should be able to use, but the compliance-driven mindset was slowing down the process. So case for quality in 2011 led to this concept of computer software assurance versus computer systems validation, and moving to operational excellence. So our industry, life sciences in general, moves slow, and the slow-moving nature of the business is part of the reason. And the other thing is technology has advanced to where now we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud-based computing, software as a service, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. So we have so many technologies. Why can't we use those technologies to advance research and advance our ability to make better drugs and biological products and medical devices? So we've learned over the course of time, and I think that is the reason why now. And by the way, the whole initiative, the guidance is coming out this year, at the end of this year, and we'll have an opportunity to respond to the guidance, and Cisco Vincenti with the FDA is spearheading this. And so anyway, it's great. It's very exciting. It's changing our industry from my perspective as we see it.
So do you think, to that point, I know pharma and medical devices and really the whole life science industry is slow moving, as you alluded to. Why have they not embraced the technology sooner? And do you think that this new guidance is going to speed things along?
I can speak specifically for what we've done here at Science 37, and well, we've embraced it. We embraced it even early,
right?
And all of this came out, and it's completely in line. So I can tell you that early on, when we were going on this approach, recognizing we could do things better, the validation, chunk of effort and time and money that's going in the project, any project could be made much more efficient. But it was frightening, right? It was scary to take that leap into the forward because of the fear of compliance, right? We can be audited, we can be inspected. We don't want findings in an audit. And so in general, across the industry, there's a fear that if we move forward, that it's going to create a problem and we may get a finding. Whereas now we're moving to operational excellence and really assurance needs, and away from the compliance hammer that will beat people over the head if they do something wrong. And so we've seen significant gains in our processes. We're as we should do. We're always improving the processes. And so, speaking for what we've done here at Science 37, we've seen benefits. The other thing is that, and we should get into it, is we have jargon in our industry, and it's hard to find technical people that understand the unique esoteric jargon of life sciences, IQ, OQ, PQ, RTM.
Yeah.
They don't train that in college. And so when a very skilled person, technology person, for example, comes into our industry, I'm sure you're aware, it takes a while to learn the lingo. And so we kind of created our own problem in that respect.
Sure.
Embracing this method, computer software assurance, case for quality, we allow the technical professionals to say, what tools are you using? Tell us what they are, and then quality and partnership will help make those things compliant. So you can use the tools that you're familiar with and help you best do your job.
So it sounds like really you're getting away from this habit of reinventing the wheel and taking what is out there and the knowledge, not even just the equipment and the processes, but the knowledge that these professionals have, and applying it now to the industry. Is that correct?
Exactly. So we're all frustrated growing up, right? If you ask why, and the answer is because it's frustrating, and we've always said, oh, you have to do this. And the question is why? And we said because, and the because could be preconceived notions, opinions, but is it really based upon a regulatory requirement, or is it just an opinion? We need to remove those opinions out of it and really make sure we understand the regulation and let people do their job as best they can, but make sure it adheres to the regulation.
Right, of course, which is a balancing act, I can imagine.
Right.
So it sounds like the upside then, in addition to really being able to speed up this process for not only just medical device manufacturers, but companies life science wide, industry wide, is the reduction in cost for them and the ability to create more efficient processes. But what specific disadvantages do you see, or are you hearing, are some of the pushback from industry at this point in time?
So change is difficult. Changing culture is difficult, and what we're talking about here is really a change in culture, and maybe it's the quality or compliance culture or the whole organization culture altogether. And so it's very difficult to get people to change, and so that is one of the key issues. And like I said before, it's it's frightening to chart new territories. You have to take a risk-based approach and really do your due diligence to make sure that's right. A lot of times it's just easier to keep doing things the same way, and then you don't have fear that you're going to push the system too much or whatever that may be. So I think the resistance is the discomfort in embracing new technologies and moving forward. That's one of the big things. And I'll give you a specific example. So software as a service. So where I work at Science 37, that is, we have software in the cloud. There are many other companies in life sciences that are operating software as a service. Then we have platform and infrastructure as a service. So these are new technologies. I shouldn't say new, they've been around, but kind of new for our life sciences space. And there's reluctance to embrace those technologies because people feel safe if their servers are inside their own walls, and there's fear that putting it out in the cloud will be a problem. And the other thing is that with software as a service, we tend to revert back. And once we get a new technology, the company will do complete full-blown validation, the whole thing, and they're retesting what's already been tested by the software vendor. Whereas a more risk-based approach could be, hey, it's software as a service. We may not even necessarily be installing anything. Do we need to do IQ? Maybe we could just focus on the PQ and the procedures, which is true performance of our processes, and that's what we should be validating. OQ, the functionality, has already been tested. Why can't we leverage what the vendor's already done? But sometimes there's more comfort in doing the full, complete validation, and you create a stack of documents, and you think that having that stack of documents will protect you in an audit and an inspection.
And is that because there's a misunderstanding? So I'm thinking of the companies or the departments who really are still insistent on having that stack of documentation and revalidating everything themselves. Is that because there's this assumption that that's what the FDA or another regulatory office is expecting of them, or is it really just a bad habit?
I don't want to say it's the bad
I'm just
habit.
curious what you think. You know what I mean? Is it just because it's what I've always done, right? I hear so many times people say,
right,
well, this is just how we've always done it. So is it really just that fallback response, do you think? Or is it because there is this assumption that is what is expected?
Well, I mean, I really want to say bad habit, but but I'm afraid I would get a lot of blowback from that. But yeah, it's just the way we've been doing it. We feel safe the way we've doing it. And think about it. We think, I'll say collectively, we think that all this documentation proves something. If we have a 3-foot stack of documentation, the system must be good.
Right.
But that documentation doesn't necessarily make sense to the technology people that are developing the software. They're doing it because they're told you must do that in order to comply.
Sure.
And you probably heard, quality won't sign off unless you do this. So everything gets stopped, right?
Right.
And I refer to it as this paper blanket pacifier. We think piece of paper or a stack of documentation that's in a controlled repository is the safest thing. We really should be looking at records, right? Records are more real time. It's right now. It's exactly what's happening. And that's the case for quality and computer software assurance is leverage the technologies, error proof. I mean, we could look for anomalies. If we have records, we can slice and dice all that information and you have immediate access. You don't have to check documents out. You have immediate access to what's really real, provided your systems are all implemented right and integrated.
Right. And that's a topic for another show, if they're not. But so I think I find it interesting as kind of a layperson, if you will, that so often I hear when it comes to the whole quality and compliance especially, organizations can sometimes feel like the regulatory offices, FDA, et cetera, are really their arch enemy, if you will, because they're just so fearful of, an audit. And and findings and things. So I find it really nice that they're offering this guidance in the form of case for quality. And I know that there's several core components of that, including a focus on quality, as you have mentioned, enhanced data transparency, which we hear about a lot in the news and otherwise, and stakeholder engagement. So to break each of those down, it seems like that. Can you break those down for us and talk a little bit about each of those core components and what it means in the industry?
Yeah. So a focus on quality as compared to compliance. And through reading webinars, if you Google case for quality and computer software assurance and Cisco Vincenti and go to Exindia, AXE and DIA and Greenlight, there's a lot of information out there. And if you go through that information, you'll see that's the change in the shift from a compliance-driven to a quality-driven. What does that really mean? Well, were we really producing quality stuff, the best quality stuff that we could produce? And the way we were doing it before, it seems like we were producing a lot of documentation, but it didn't necessarily mean that we were producing a quality product. So what does quality mean? Well, it's getting rid of the errors. It's using a risk-based approach so we can be scientific and use critical thinking. In a lot of the information, there's this paradigm where we had documentation and testing and then assurance needs and the other one was critical thinking, and they're flipping that paradigm completely upside down where we should be doing critical thinking first, assurance needs, then testing, then documentation. And so I like it that this is completely shifting around. And in all fairness, I mean, the number one concern for all of us must be patient safety, which is the FDA's, main charter or mission, whatever you. So patient safety is number one. And if you look throughout history, we've had catastrophes that resulted in regulations, and that's what's being enforced. So we don't want to have a catastrophe. We don't want to harm people. But how can we start producing better quality products? We can use a risk-based approach. If we are applying the same rigor across the board for low, insignificant items as we are for high risk, we're probably not giving high risk enough attention, and we may be wasting time on the insignificant, no impact, low risk things. So that's what the risk-based approach does. And least burdensome is improving the efficiency of the process so we can make things better and quicker. We could respond to things more quickly. So that's I think the first part of it, the quality aspect of it. And what was so
the data transparency.
Okay,
is another component, and I wonder how that's going to be implemented.
So if we are really being encouraged to use technology, if we have a stack of documentation, it's hard to find information in that stack of documentation. So it pretty much gets filed away and gives us a false sense of security. But to access it, we have to get to that controlled document repository, find the information in all these documents. Why not leverage technology with electronic records and have immediate access to query information? Why not have systems in place that can look for anomalies and flag things for us automatically? Have systems in place that look at logs and can tell us if something has happened or predict if something is going to happen. So that is the transparency of information. Don't bury things in documents when we can leverage technology like every other industry pretty much in the world, that it doesn't get filed away. We have immediate 24/7 access around the globe if it's in a cloud solution, for example. And then the final one was stakeholders.
Yes.
So this is very interesting. So we took this major initiative here at Science 37 and we said, let's improve the validation improvement project is our VIP is what we called it. And working very closely, quality is pretty much embedded with the tech team, and we collaborate and work closely together. And we took a major step back, and I work very close with the VP of engineering and others on the team. And we took a step back and we said a couple things. One, we can't make decisions because we think we're going to get a finding or from an auditor or an inspector. We can't read their minds. We shouldn't be doing stuff just to avoid findings. We should do really follow high quality practices and deliver a quality product. And if we do that with standard procedures and such, then we will not have a concern about an audit because everything is in line and compliant. And so we worked very closely and said, don't use that as an excuse, which you hear a lot of times. You must do this or you'll get a finding. And that's
Right.
more of the compliance mindset. The other thing, like I alluded to before, is we let the tech professionals say, what tools are you using? And allowed them to identify their tools. Then we integrated the tools. So we have a seamless process all the way from code to final documentation. And we do generate the validation documentation, but everything is electronic with integration between the systems. It's the tools that the tech team know and understand and like to use. And as a result, we can trace forward and backward. And the most amazing thing that happened when it came time to roll out the process, it was the tech team that trained themselves. Whereas before, you create a procedure, you have to train the people, it may not be understood. So quality is always getting these questions, what does this mean? It was pretty amazing to sit back and as quality and watch the tech team train themselves on the new process.
That's amazing. And and just listening to you, it seems obvious to me that this is something that should be embraced because it is shifting the focus from that, fear of finding to, are we really producing the best whatever device, software, drug that we can? But that being said, do you see, it sounds like it could be expensive, time consuming to move in that direction. So do you see this case for quality as being something that is attainable more so for the larger companies as opposed to emerging research groups, et cetera? Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, so I don't think any company of any size is prohibited from embracing new technology. And a lot of exciting things are happening. Let's briefly talk about, and by the way, I want to step back. The fear of findings, I like that. I'm going to use that. So that is, we are kind of paralyzed by the fear of findings.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So that I like how you phrase that. But anyway, so any size company can go to the cloud. For example, just as an example, Amazon Web Services, other cloud-based, Google, Microsoft, they all have their own as well. But with Amazon Web Services, you can embrace artificial intelligence and machine learning. They have it available. It's kind of like widgets that you can just grab and implement in your system. So I don't think any company is prohibited. And these solutions, cloud-based solutions, are scalable. They can grow with you, or even if you shrink as a company, you could shrink. And they're elastic. They can stretch to meet your needs. So I don't think any company is prohibited, and we see it all the time. Let's face it, science, we call ourselves a startup, but we've been around for about 5 years.
Right.
But, we're a start. When we started, we embraced this technology as a new startup. And then other larger companies also are adopting. I don't think anybody is prohibited from entering into the space.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I mean, I get that the cloud actually is less expensive in a lot of ways for many companies, but I think the process to get to being cloud dependent sometimes may be cost prohibitive just because of the time and the equipment and or resources that they need to put in place. So I think that's where I was going with that question. But it's good to hear that it may have little impact on smaller companies because, they need some help getting into the next phase of technology. So everything I was reading in online mentioned that this new push for Case for Quality is sort of a voluntary pilot program at present. I'm not sure if that's accurate or if I was looking at old information. But how do you see this program progressing over the next months, years? In your opinion, how do you see it rolling out?
So I think that with the guidance for industry, which we should all look out for, I don't think it's been released yet. So we should all look out for that and take a look when it is released and provide our feedback so that we could come up with a good standard regulation, whatever it may be. So that's one thing there. And I just lost my train of
Oh,
thought.
that's okay. Take a breath there. So yeah, how do you see this rolling out? I mean, obviously it has yet to be released in its
Right.
official form,
Right.
but we are expecting it later this year, correct?
Yeah, the guidance is coming out later. Sorry about that.
That's
The
okay.
guidance is coming out later this year. So, at Science 37, we're not a medical device company. Neither do we consider our software as a medical device. But I think that we could leverage that. So we may not be a medical device company, but by the fact that there are presentations from Cisco Vincenti in the medical device space. I mean, FDA is one group, even though they have these different areas. So we believe that we're in line with the FDA's thinking, and I think that it will expand. I think it will go across. We've embraced it, and we're not in the medical device space, but I think it will go across to all of the other areas. So not just medical device, but also for the biologics and the pharmaceuticals and other organizations involved in life sciences as well. So I think it will expand. I think we took the initiative to embrace it. I hope others are actually taking the initiative. We're hearing about it more and more, and we encourage other companies. I do want to take a step back and I'm not sure if it's actually more expensive because early on I said 20% is average cost for validation. So if you can improve efficiencies, and let's say you have $1 million project, that's $200,000. So if you can be 50% more efficient, you've just saved $100,000 and multiply that by how many systems you have.
Great
And
point. Yeah.
I worked at a large company and we had over 1,000 regulated systems. So that the cost there, I think, could be substantial, and the savings are good.
Which of course is then a nod in the direction of the smaller companies, right? This is more of a reason for them to embrace it because money is very important. Saving money, being being efficient for sure. And again, I like your point earlier of saying we are doing all of this with patient safety in mind. So, implementing these things, whether they are more efficient or cost us less money, it sounds like it's just the right thing to do to improve what's being delivered to the end user.
Right. And that's one other thing. Risk-based approach is part of all of this. And we had it. Were we really using it? It seems like everything shakes out as high risk. And the problem with that is if everything is high risk, you've lost the real high risk things in the pile of the medium and low risk as well.
Sure.
But yeah, patient safety is number one, but there are also other risks that should be factored in. And we looked at it and we came up with about 6 different areas, including patient safety, number one, business technology, data integrity, data privacy, and security. And so we assess risk on all of those different facets. And I want to put out one other thing that happens a lot. We have people assessing patient safety risk, but we have to ask ourselves, are they really the people that should be doing that? So is a computer, I'm going to pick on a software engineer. It used to be my past. So me as a software engineer, is it really appropriate for me to assess patient safety? I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not the chief medical officer. So what we did is looked at those different facets, those 6 different facets, and had the key professional come up with the matrix so that we could appropriately assess risk based upon a matrix from a professional. So our chief medical officer came up with the patient safety. The other respective areas came up with the security, legal with data privacy, data integrity, et cetera. So we're really using a risk-based approach, looking at all the risk, and we have the appropriate people saying what the true risk really is. And I think that's really important. If you're going to embrace this, you need a really good risk management process in place to effectively assess risk.
Well, it sounds like it is going to be a welcome guidance once we finally have it. And I am very interested in a follow-up conversation with you once we see, how it sort of rolls in to the life science industry as a whole. I think that it'll be really really enlightening for us to see the actual and get some case studies maybe for some of the companies that are embracing it early, and help those that are having a little bit more pushback from the fear or from just the unwillingness to move to the next step. So hopefully we can get you back again once that happens. But
would love to, and I will say that we are doing it now, and there are other companies. And there's a saying, I don't remember who came up with it, but those who say it can't be done are often passed by those who are actually doing it. So people are doing it, and it's important to move ahead and be innovative, embrace technologies. But I do want to say we've embraced it, and we're actually doing it. And
well
it works,
said.
So.
Good for you. Good for you. So let's see if the others can keep up.
Let's see.
Yeah. So Steve, I thank you so much. That 30 minutes flew by. And I do look forward to a follow-up conversation with you in the not too distant future, just to get some more information about how it's been working for you at Science 37. And then maybe what we're seeing in the industry as this does get more popularized and, out there with the FDA. But I thank you for your time today. And anything else you want to leave our audience with before we part?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I really hope others take to heart what was said and see if they could implement it. I think if we all move, we'll all help each other out.
Agreed. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guest, Steve Thompson, as well as Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, where we're recording today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe in your favorite player and share with your friends. You can find out more by visiting our website, ivtnetwork.com. And stay tuned for the next episode when we talk about navigating the process of audit trails in pharmaceuticals. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.